Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, the time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome to the Raising Cain Show. I'm your host, Nate Cain. Tonight, we're diving into the hidden corridors of power with our special guest, Colonel John R. Mills. As a retired colonel and former Director of Cybersecurity Policy in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Colonel Mills brings unparalleled insight into the clandestine world of the deep state. In this explosive episode, we'll explore the threats facing our nation and the urgent need to reclaim our constitutional governance. Colonel Mills, a key player in national security spanning 5 critical eras, will reveal shocking details from his books, War Against the Deep State and The Nation Will Follow. He'll share firsthand experiences battling government overreach and the deep state's insidious influence. Prepare to be informed, challenged, and inspired as we unravel the truth about mass surveillance, political corruption, and the fight to preserve American freedom. What hidden dangers lurk within our government, folks? How can we combat these threats? Colonel Mills will provide answers and unveil his action plan to dismantle the shadowy branches of government undermining our democracy. Join us as we embark on a journey to expose the truth and defend our republic. This is the Raising Cain Show, where we stand at the front lines of truth and liberty. Colonel, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Nate, thank you so much. Honor to be on your show.
So, we hear this term deep state, and, a lot of people, they have different ideas about what that is, but how do you define the deep state and what are its main characteristics?
Well, thank you, Nate. There's, I think, 3 different ways to describe the deep state. First of all, there's essentially 3 personalities involved in the deep state. In the federal government, there's bureaucrats. I was a bureaucrat, both in form and as a civilian. And those in uniform can be bureaucrats also. Those are the worker bees or drones of the deep state. Then you have the technocrats, and those are really a lot of them who rise to senior levels of careerist power. Dr. Fauci is really one of the models of that. His word was unquestioned. He was literally the highest paid civil servant in the U.S. government. He was on a doctor's pay scale, so a different pay scale. But it's the technocrats. And then you have the plutocrats, and that's where you get the Bezos, the Zuckerbergs that have great wealth, and I'll describe it in a little bit. And became the marriage of big tech and big government. So those are the personalities. To box it, you kind of got 4 corners of deceit. You got obviously big government. You have big academia. I'm an adjunct professor at 2 different universities. I love academia, but it has to always be transparency, accountability. There's big tech, and I think that also in the modern times, big media is really subsumed in there. So that's really where big media goes in that corner. And then the 4th corner, it's really kind of businesses such as big pharma, who have just have so much control over with the approval process for drugs and vaccines. We saw the perversion of it, but it really spun out of control long before the vaccine scam of 2020. So that's that. And then the third way of looking at it is the unlawful fourth, fifth, and sixth branches of government.
Mm.
The fourth being the administrative state, which actually traces to U.S. law, the 1940 Administrative Procedures Act. It's been beaten down a lot by the Supreme Court, most recently in the Chevron ruling, where the
Right.
government must defer to those bureaucrats I mentioned for the interpretation of events which become de facto law. So overturning the Chevron doctrine, huge stake in the heart of the administrative state, the
Mm.
fourth branch. The fifth branch is that marriage of big tech and big tech and the federal law enforcement, federal intelligence community. And that was part of my portfolio, was to reestablish a relationship with the innovation of Silicon Valley and the U.S. government. That was 2000, end of Bush, beginning of Obama.
Hmm.
And that marriage really was consummated in 2010s. And then the sixth branch of government is are the nonprofits. The poster child.
NGOs, yeah.
Yeah, there's two kind of post children. There's the UPenn Biden Center, a nonprofit that perhaps is buried somewhere inside the University of Pennsylvania. And you grab the IRS Form 990s. Always do that with a nonprofit.
Hmm.
But another poster child are all these, unfortunately, religious NGOs that receive immense largesse for enabling and taking all of the illegals coming across the border. Oh, it's the compassionate to do,
Right.
but they receive a lot of money for doing it. Also, they actually probably wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for all this government largesse. So,
Yeah.
three different ways to describe the deep state.
It's interesting because I've often looked at this. You hear this term, a public-private partnership, right? But oftentimes it seems like policy is driven, by many of these large corporations, the elite, technocrats, as you mentioned, and it feels to me like we're living in an age of like some sort of neo-fascism, where it's the corporate state essentially driving all the policies, like especially when it came down to COVID and the drug companies, and what they were able to accomplish, that really went against our constitutional rights, and nothing that we've ever, completely unprecedented in American history, for them to be able to just tell people, you got to shut your business down and you got to inject yourself with this if you want to continue to work and have a job. I'm one of the original signers on the military accountability, group, of course, and that's been a very important issue to me. I was, in the military when they, forced us to take anthrax vaccines, and I ended up getting all 8 shots. And I, when I told them, I said, I don't know if I should be taking these because I had the first shot, and I really did not feel well from it. And so I questioned them about all these boosters. But they said, if you don't take it, you're out of the military. So, these kinds of strangleholds, that end up on, it really violating our rights have concerned me. And it seems like it's not just coming from our government, but it's coming through our government, via these, globalists and, the Davos groups and World Health Organization, those types of organizations that seem to be pushing a lot of this, but also some of the corporations that stand to make a lot of money, from these decisions. You have, you've got a pretty distinguished career that really goes over a very long period of time, and what would you say, if you were to provide me a deep, kind of a brief history of how the deep state has evolved from the Cold War era to today's geopolitical landscape, how would you describe that?
Well, I mean, some people go back to Eisenhower's statement of a military-industrial complex. I think
Mhm.
that was one of the points at which somebody identified. I always go back to, we have the 1947 and 1949 National Security Acts, which created the Department of Defense, a unified military, or a Secretary of Defense. also created the CIA. Now, I'm all for, I'm all for the CIA as it was originally purposed.
Right.
And, I always urge everybody, go to the front page of the CIA webpage, always read the Doolittle report, because when Eisenhower took over, he says, okay, I got this thing called the CIA. I mean, I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with it. And so he brought in Lieutenant General Doolittle, the same guy who flew Army bombers off of Navy aircraft carriers to bomb Tokyo. He said, Lieutenant General Doolittle, what am I supposed to do with this thing called? I know we have a law setting it up. What am I supposed to do with it? And he wrote the Doolittle report. And read that was really, it's not law, but really is a great defining document on what law really meant as it translated into action. Because law is not the same as regulation. The law oftentimes needs interpretation and has to flow into regulation. But the Doolittle were beautiful. Okay, so those are because it says we are in a life or death struggle with communism, and we're going to have to take off the gloves like we've never done it before. Okay, got it. Okay, I got it. That's great, and in some ways we're victorious, but communism has come back under different forms. So those were some of the defining moments. I think the challenge in the modern deep state, and I think which is much different than what we've kind of, we've wealthy people, the United States government was dominated by people who went to, Ivy League schools, and there was a lot of truth to that. But I think things have really changed radically, and we have a much different, unfortunately, there's been a mass weaponization of the powers of government against the citizen in a way that was never seen before. And as much as we saw malfeasance. So it's much different today. And it's those three groups, the four corners, and the three unlawful branches of government that have developed. And I think the tipping point was about 2010, and that's again the 2 years into the Obama administration, where they really saw, because at first that relationship between Obama and Silicon Valley was they were very wary of each other, but then I think about 2010 they saw, we are kindred spirits, and we really can do a lot if we unite. And I think from that point onward, it was much different.
There was a quote from Obama. I just pulled it up here. On October 30th, 2008, just before the presidential election, he told a crowd in Columbia, Missouri, we are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. And I really do believe that Obama was not somebody that wanted to maintain U.S. dominance, in the world. He wanted to fundamentally change the U.S., wanted to, basically destroy our power around the world. And then the very first thing he did, of course, after becoming president was, go on the great apology tour. And, he reminded me of the kind of the new academics of this era where we have this, wokeism. He really introduced that into our government, and he kind of did it subtly at first, but it very quickly, by his second term, he was in full blown woke mode, and more dangerously, I think, utilizing the powers and the tools of the intelligence community to really, do grave damage, to our Constitution and to the trust of the American people in their government. When you think of, you were just mentioning about the mass surveillance, this is an area that has been a major concern of mine. I was part of a cyber protection team with Marfor Cyber and was detached to NSA on the national mission. So I was read on to FISA and intelligence authorities, all of those nasty little tools that, if used improperly, are very dangerous. And I remember being read on and being told that, look, if you abuse these tools, you're going to jail for like 10 years for each offense. And I never messed with it, and, but it seems that something changed at the end of Obama's term, his second term. And he did make some changes to the rules that allowed for the passing of unmasked, information between the agencies, things like that. I think it was all really a setup, for the Trump-Russia collusion and Crossfire Hurricane and setting Donald Trump up. They had to do these things in order to be able to spy on him. But what is your thoughts on like in your time in government? What was some of the examples of deep state operations that you encountered? Where they abused these types of tools and things like that.
Well, I think it was early 2016, and so I helped, the mass surveillance program was really set up under CNCI. All the cyber protection teams really flowed from the construct established by it's called the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative, started in 2007 at the end of Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because we realized at that time the problem was Russia in many ways, but the pivot point to China really took place in the 2010 to 2012. From that point on, everybody was a colony of China. It was
Mm-hmm.
Russia's a colony of China, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, all colonies of China. The game is China. But I think, no, I helped set up a lot of this stuff. There's very formal legal processes and reviews to go through. To establish legality and privacy and civil liberties, and we followed them. But it became when the capabilities, because we wanted to take it out of the tailored access model where you created a very, 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 very tailored operation for very, 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 very specific missions. We want to collect on somebody doing something, a terrorist somewhere doing something.
Right.
That's okay, it's good, but that doesn't scale. And we want somebody to do it far more, because we'll go broke trying to create a bazillion tailored operations. We want to be able to on scale. And we started to do that, and we started to see the incredible rich data that could be had. And I think it just, in many ways, it intoxicated people. And I think they
Mm-hmm.
kind of lost their minds when you saw the magic that could be had and the growth of presence. If you watch the charts when we were briefing this quarterly and annually, the points of presence just took off like a skyrocket. And it was like, wow, this is now collecting on a scale that's just exponentially increasing every year. And the speed of the data and the data analytics is breathtaking and just getting better all the time. Anything magic the magic is intoxicating, and it has
Mm-hmm.
and it also leads people down wrong paths and wrong moral choices. But this is where you got led to unmasking. But it was early 2016 when I started to realize something was wrong. And that was when all of a sudden, out of the blue, in a lot of these high level classified meetings, all of a sudden it was Trump, 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 Russia, Russia, Russia. It's those Russians again, just
Yep.
like 2012 when they were getting involved. And that was the early days, 2012. And I just got a little asterisk here is the Russians and the Chinese, and really again it's the Chinese who are the boss now. They
Mm-hmm.
watch what we do, and they study what we do very clearly, and they mimic it and play it right back at us. But it was like, okay, here we go again. It's those Russians, not China. It was those
Yeah.
Russians in early 2016, and they really are interested in this guy named Trump. And I'm a professional. I'm a careerist. I uphold the my office. Civilians and military take oaths of office. And I said, okay, well, let's. This. I mean, at the time, I was not necessarily a Trump guy in my personal politics, and I tried to keep my personal politics out of the workplace. But I said, okay, this is interesting. Okay, later, fast forward the camera and the film, who was feeding us that information? And this is part of the lengthy information I gave to the Durham in John Durham's investigation. And he had to fire people on his staff because they were absolute lowballing and stonewalling. And the fact that Durham got out his report at all was just a testimony to his brute force, because he had staff lawyers who were absolutely trying to undermine everything. But it was Charles McGonigal. So the guy who was telling us Russia, Russia, Russia turned out to be later. And I didn't know exactly who it was, but all the FBI briefers were going, oh boy, we got some good information. This is so good. It's those Russians. And who was the source of this? The FBI Director of Counterintelligence in the New York Field Office,
That's right.
Charles McGonigal, who now we know and is in prison, was being paid by the Russians.
Yeah.
The guy, you never trust your director of counterintelligence, as James Angleton used to say at the CIA. I mean, so the guy who was saying Russia, Russia, Russia was being paid by the Russians to say Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, this doesn't make it even intellectual sense. Why are the Russians paying? Well, the Russians mischievous, regardless. But I think there was a lot of Chinese fingerprints on this. But hey, this started the spy operation of Crossfire Hurricane, because you always need a predicate. Why would we be spying?
That's right.
And so Comey and Brennan, and like after I left government, it was April of 2018. I was in downtown DC at a meeting. I'm not going to say where. And the person I was meeting with comes and says, who's on the other side of the drywall? I said, no, who's on the other side of the drywall? He says, well, it's General Hayden, who's looked at as a demigod, the Shar School of Government over at George Mason. I mean, treats them as some kind of deity. I mean, I used to really like the guy, and I realized he was part of the deep state coup. So it's General Hayden sitting on the other side of the drywall in his twice a week update on talking points with Comey, Clapper, and Brennan. And I tell you what, I just took this guy and shoved him through the drywall so I could just put Hayden in a chokehold. I mean, this is treasonous. This is ridiculous. I mean, this was just 4 months ago. I was having a breakfast with somebody over in McLean, Virginia. It's a place where all the spooks hang out for breakfast. And I'm walking out the door, and I almost literally run into Clapper. Clapper one time, a long time ago, signed a very nice award for me. I didn't want to be ugly with the guy, but I was upset with the guy. But he just lost his wife. I didn't want to get ugly with the guy. But if it would have been a few months later, where it was like about a month ago when he was given an opportunity to come clean about the lie of the 51 intel officer letter, because we know it's a lie. It's a lie.
Yeah.
Total lie. That's one of the outcomes of the Durham investigation. The 51 intel officer letter was a lie. Anybody who signed that charged under 18 U.S. Code 1001, false statements by federal officials. But Clapper was given an opportunity to come clean, and he said, hold it. You signed a false statement. So if I would have known that, I probably would have given an elbow to the throat to Clapper, even been charged with assault of an elderly person. But I mean, I really disgusting. It's really disgusting.
Yeah.
Why do these people do that? Now I found out later, just about last month, I just found out that during the 90s, when Clapper was the director of Defense Intelligence Agency, one of his star children in the agency he just loved and protected was none other than Anna Montez. Anna, the desk officer for Cuba, who, guess what, was a paid spy for Cuba. So did Clapper know she was corrupt and a spy for Cuba? Was he corrupt too? So this is the problem. We got deep corruption in the leadership.
Well, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with another whistleblower today. I don't know if you're familiar with my background, but I was an FBI whistleblower that exposed their cover-up of Hillary Clinton's crimes. And with my background as a cyber protection team member, particularly on the DCI Hunt team, when I saw everything going down about her email server, and I'm looking at these FBI, analyst notes on these TSARs, basically saying high probability of money laundering, going through all these NGOs into her foundation, coming from countries that are not friendly countries to the United States. They're adversarial, but going through multiple, being laundered, basically. I saw that, and then Comey comes out and he gives that speech out in front of the J. Edgar Hoover building. And he says, oh yeah, we found 7 special access programs on her email server, which most Americans don't even know what that means. But, people who have a background in the intelligence community know you don't get a special access program and walk out of, a skiff with it, let alone put it on a personal computer, that's sitting in your bathroom basement, and at home. And, but he also mentioned thousands of classified emails, that were secret as well. And I just couldn't help but think, was this thing a Dropbox? Was she selling secrets? And that's what I was thinking as he's talking. Then he says, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against her. She was, not very sophisticated, and didn't really understand things. And, and then he says, we do know that there's evidence that her personal email server had been infiltrated, that there was exfiltration from foreign adversarial, nation states. So as soon as he said that, I'm like, okay, so it was a Dropbox. This woman was likely selling secrets, putting them there so that they could be, hacked out of that computer. And then she has her plausible deniability. And there were so many connections. And of course, most of what I saw, I couldn't even get into the details of because of its being classified. But it was like how it showed me how corrupt the leadership was. And, and so when we saw Comer coming out, Representative Comer coming out with all of these ties of China and these back, alley business dealings between the Biden family and China, it was no surprise to me. And I started realizing, putting two and two together, and I realized that stuff was going on during the Obama administration too. And in fact, one of the big things that I blew the whistle on was the FBI's cover up of Uranium One and the Clinton Foundation's involvement in that. And when I originally came out with my first set of documents, I was asked by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Devin Nunes, one of his senior staffers, asked me to go back in and get an intelligence report that would show what they knew and when they knew it. And when I went back in, I found the document they were looking for. And what shocked me was all the people whose names were connected with it. They were all in the key leadership positions, including Comey, Robert Mueller, who was the FBI director at the time, that they were investigating that. You also had the U.S. attorney for Maryland at the time, which was Rod Rosenstein. He was the one that led the investigation into 10X and arms. Then you also had somebody else who was the head of the public corruption unit for the FBI, which was Michael Atkinson, the intelligence community inspector general. And so basically everybody who I would have to go through in order to blow the whistle through legal means of, the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act, which was the only thing I had available to me as a contractor, they were all involved. And so it left me in a very sticky, predicament. And so I decided to go outside the chain and go directly to the HPSI. And but eventually I did have to go back through the IG, but I couldn't do it with the with the intelligence community IG. I had to go through Michael Horowitz at the DOJ, and he actually did me, he did me a solid and actually recognized the importance of those documents. And when there was opposition, Jeff Sessions refused to even review it, to give it a credibility rating, because he had, recused himself from all things Russia. And so Horowitz actually came back and said, look, this is unbelievable. He's breaking the law. By law, he's required to do this. But he said, I feel like this is important enough information that it needs to go to both the House and Senate Intel committees. Would you be okay with me giving it a credibility rating? So he gave it a credibility rating and then delivered it to both the House and Senate Intel committees himself, because they didn't want to take it from me unless I was willing to testify, which at the time I had anonymity. Why would I want to testify and put a target on my back? So these games that they play and the corruption at the highest levels within the Department of Justice and the FBI in particular, were pretty frightening, to think that, that these were the guys who were involved in that. And now they're the guys that were running, it was the same people who were basically running, these operations against Trump. In fact, Robert Mueller, the former FBI director, it seemed clear to me that they were trying to cover up their cover up, and they wanted to keep Trump out of the FBI. They did not want him looking into what they were doing for the last 8 years. So I totally understand what you're talking about in terms of corruption at the highest levels. It certainly was there. And in regards to Russia, which is interesting, when you were talking about, you recognized something was off when they were talking Russia, Russia, Russia. I had the same inclinations, but for me, it was when the DNC hack happened. And you had all of these, people saying, oh, it's Russia, Russia, Russia hacked the DNC. And I'm like, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? And the FBI was not even allowed access to the servers to validate or verify that it was the Russians. Instead, they hired who? CrowdStrike. Interestingly enough, this company who was just involved in the biggest takedown of IT systems ever in the history of computers. So, which they claim.
You can't have a disaster without. So as soon as the CrowdStrike thing came up, and I know CrowdStrike pretty well, the name Kurtz came up, George Kurtz. And I'm going, George Kurtz. Where did he come from? And I realized, started going back, oh my. The event that essentially destroyed McAfee, one of the original giants of cybersecurity, was the 2010. There was a patch they pushed that essentially made all the Windows XP computers essentially vomit and just go out of control. That whole episode really knocked out McAfee. Essentially had to be sold. I mean, it's kind of, McAfee's now kind of the Bell and Howell or Kodak Carousel of cyber. I mean, it was once a great name. It's a memory now. It still exists, but it's nothing like what it was. But so it was Kurtz. 2 in a row. He's the Fauci of cyber, but it gets better. There's Dmitry Alperovich, also of CrowdStrike, also of questionable relationship to Hillary in 2016 and 2020. Guess who was the director of cyber threats at McAfee? Okay, it was Dmitry Alperovich. He is, so the two of them have now essentially either destroyed a company or in the process of destroying a company. Why is this? What is their gain? Is somebody paying them? Are they short selling them? Have they just screwed up really?
Oh, I never thought about that. That's a very good point. Who's making money on shorting their stock?
Yeah, I mean, this is really reasonable. Now, there's another person involved. He left the FBI, Sean Henry, who was a good guy. I worked with him many years at the White House. A great guy, had been very good to me in many ways, but he went CrowdStrike, and he was the one who really, I mean, he was retired FBI, but he was really frothing at the mouth that Trump was a Russian asset. However, when he gave classified testimony to Adam Schiff. Sean is a wily guy and knows the difference of just making a wild statement in public versus being under oath. So when he was under oath at the classified level with Adam Schiff, he said, "We got nothing on Trump, nothing." So he told truth when he was giving classified testimony, and that testimony has been declassified and released. So Sean. And he made some serious money when CrowdStrike went public, because he retired from the FBI, got a very good payout from the EO. But he knew he would huff and puff and make a theatrical show about Trump, Russia in public. When under oath, well, we got nothing on him, nothing. Lies. Just people want to make money. It's pathetic and sick.
Yep. Well, folks, we've been getting into some really interesting topics. I need to cut to a commercial break to give a word to our sponsors, but we will be right back, and we will be getting more into these topics and shedding light on them. And we're going to talk about action plan to combat the deep state and what can we do, and what should the Trump administration and this next administration, what can they do to overcome some of these challenges? We'll be right back.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
Not believe, no detergent, no hot water, no fabric softener. Now you even threw away all the chemicals to clean your home. I don't need to buy sprays to cut through grease. I don't need to buy window cleaners. I don't need to buy carpet shampoo. I don't need to buy things to mop my floor. I don't need to buy things to take pesticide off my vegetables, fruits, and fish. Oh my gosh, where did this come from? I'll tell you where it came from. It came from hospitals. This is actually a photo of a huge commercial hospital laundry technology that cost in excess of $100,000 if you bought that whole thing, and it'll fill up your garage. That's how big it is. And what we've done with the advent of microelectronic technology, my team and I constantly use microtechnology just like your smartphone. The new EcoWasher SE is a chemical-free laundry and cleaning solution. Imagine, no more detergent, no more chemicals, saves you money, pays for itself, gives you a healthier life, and simplifies doing laundry. And now we're going to include 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis that purifies your home and sanitizes your surfaces like a thunderstorm in nature, eliminates all odors. Plus, you're receiving $100 off by using code PODCAST on the new EcoWasher SE. Let me remind you, 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis plus $100 off during this podcast. Podcast is your coupon code at
Military use when they need unlimited power during critical missions. Civilians like you can now get their hands on the exact same technology within 24 hours for pennies on the dollar. Folks, as a former infantry soldier, I can tell you this is the best and cheapest way to get reliable, unlimited energy. And no, I'm not talking about regular generators or the expensive solar panels. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. There's no maintenance needed. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And the best part, you won't need to rely on the power grid anymore. Click below now and hit play.
Folks, we're back. This is the Raising Cain Show, and we're here with our guest, Colonel John Mills. So, Colonel Mills, let me ask you, we've talked about a lot of, we could talk for hours on a lot of this stuff, especially related to the Russia hoax and surveillance and all of that. But one of the things that I hope to get out of these shows is to talk to people about what can they do, and what should our government, hopefully the Trump administration, if they get in there, what will be, the most critical steps for them in dismantling the fourth, fifth, and sixth branches of government?
Well, I think 97% of us should be spending 99% of energy right where they live in their county. This is they pulled the wool over our eyes in 2020. A lot of it was because the blue team has spent years understanding the mechanics of the election process. Now, this is not a tome or a dissertation on election machines or things like that. There's multiple forms of malappropriation. I think this year it's going to be, and this is something I'm pursuing county level, is I think it's going to be, they've put the disconnect between the 1993 motor voter law, which is line one of your, I guarantee it on everybody, no matter which state they're in right now. Line one of the driver's license applicant form is, do you want to vote? Yes, no. If somebody writes down yes, there is no validation. That name automatically goes on your state election rolls, which normally the legal official is not your commissioner of elections at state, it's your county registrar at your county level. In Virginia, we have 130 county equivalents. We got 100 counties, 30 cities that are county equivalents. It's those 130 registrars that are responsible for keeping a clean roll. Registrars are very, very, there's a National Association of Registrars. In Arizona, they're called recorders. Alaska calls them something different. Michigan, it's a little bit of a different, Michigan and Pennsylvania have a little bit different arrangements. But citizens, you have to get involved in your county, and most of us go, okay, yeah, I'm a poll watcher for my county GOP, and I go, yeah, that's not getting involved. Okay,
No.
that's a poll watcher is a waste of time, and the GOP should be ashamed of themselves for that's just wasting people's time. Do you, in any process analysis of any system, do you want to be in front of the counter hoping to see something that somebody's doing wrong? Or do you want to be behind the counter counting the votes and understanding the electronic infrastructure, understanding the mechanical process? Well, I mean, if you have any brains, you want to be behind the counter as one of the sworn election officials. And everybody goes, well, how do I become a sworn election official? Well, yeah, you volunteer. You volunteer. Yep. 90% of the people who work elections are deputized citizens who come on temporarily to be a temporary election officer. You're a deputized citizen. So the message is for the viewers to get involved. We have to secure 3,300 counties. That's where the rot and corruption starts. And the swamp would not exist in DC if it wasn't for a handful of dirty counties, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada. And that's where the action's at. So, I mean, it's good to watch your show, other shows, get smart. But we've got to really put our shoulder to the wheels at the county level. Because if you don't, I mean, I ask, which county are you in? Which county are you in? And they go, I don't even know. Well, okay, first of all, you got to know which county you live in, okay? And I say, well, who's your registrar in your county? I don't know. I have no idea. What is a registrar? Okay, that's the person who runs elections, okay? You got to understand 7 key people in your county, and that's your registrar, that's your county council, that's your election board, that's your school board, that's your sheriff, that's your judge, that's your prosecutor. Every one of these 3,300 counties has somebody fulfilling one of those 7 functions.
Right.
That's where the action's at, citizen. That's where the action's at, right where you live. Understand.
Well, here in West Virginia, it's our county clerk is our registrar, and the thing that is just so important, and you're absolutely right, is that the registration actually is where it all begins. And I've looked at I've worked on election integrity quite a bit, and there's a lot of focus on the tabulation and all of that. But if you have a paper ballot and you can go back and do a hand count against it, you can very quickly see whether or not tabulations happen correctly. However, if you've got fake voters to begin with, whether they're illegals, whether they are, voters that are not authorized to vote, or whether they are just people that are dead or from other states or whatever, or people that are on the registry but they don't actually show up to vote, that's a dangerous thing, because if they cheat within the registration, no recount will ever see that, ever. And they know that, which is why ballot stuffing has been always the number one way that people have cheated in elections going back to time immemorial. It's it's the hardest thing to see, unless you're actually going through and cleaning the voter rolls and making sure that you don't have people registered to addresses that don't exist, or, to parking lots and things like that, or people who moved away 10 years ago, but all of a sudden they're still voting and, in elections every year. That's not likely them voting. It's likely somebody else using a counterfeit voter or straw voter. So very important stuff. Now, what about, specific policy changes? What do you recommend, or what could you see that could effectively address the influence of the deep state?
Well, the election, we got to play the ball where it lies as far as the election. People will rant and rave about, I want one-day election. Well, yeah, I want one-day election also. I want paper ballots only. Well, yeah, I want paper ballots only. But guess what? Elections are, most of the laws on the conduct of elections are state level. You got to play the ball where it lies. If your state allows an election season, you may hate it. Don't get angry. Leverage it to win. And once you have a majority in your state legislature, then you can vote to get the law changed. But you got to play the ball where it lies right now. And so there's not a one answer that scales to the entire country. But this is where people will rant and rave. Paper ballots. Well, yeah, paper ballots. I want one-day voting. But you're not going to do that till you control the legislature. And the problem is, in most states, you got a dirty county that is really perverting the whole state. So you got to get the other counties to outvote in the legislature. So you got to make sure you got majorities in the legislature. And the Republicans, I think, control, 30 of the 50 states, I think, are Republican controlled. It's a majority are Republican, but we get all these milquetoast weenie hut Republicans that chose, and most of them, they have no idea how the election process
Yeah, most of them are
works.
not very educated about this stuff.
They don't care, and it's all they know is some county GOP person got them to run. They put up their money. They are able to get some funders, and they won. They have no idea how they won, but they won. Okay, so you go back and start talking to them about these kind of things, and they go, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I mean, so you got to hold your officials. You got to get a majority. And you got to get these things changed, but you got to, if you have an election season, you vote any way possible, and you get anybody else to vote any way possible, and get those ballots in there. But again, I think one of the key things is working behind the counter as one of those sworn election officers. You can understand the process, and you can haul people into court. I've done that, about to do it again. And so you can hold people accountable, because that's where the action's at. And that's,
and there's a grand jury process that at the county level that isn't used hardly at all, but we should be using it, because that is a perfectly good, justified reason, for bringing these cases when, there's something that's happening in your district. One of the things that concerns me is that when it comes to our local state legislature, it always seems like the funny thing is that's where we have the most power, and yet that's where people have the least interest, right? They're interested in voting for the president, but they don't care or know about who their local county officers are, who their DA is, who their sheriff is. Like, oftentimes, they just don't know. They certainly don't know who their school board members are. And it's oftentimes hard to find information on, but yet those are we have more power there than we do anywhere else to make a difference. And I agree with you. I think that, people need to step up and get off the couch and run for office and step into some of these positions. You don't like what's going on in your school board, well, then run. And, the fact is in many of these states, like, here in West Virginia, where it's a primarily, conservative Republican state, there's no reason we should have any leftists on any school board. And yet we do, because people don't step up to run for those positions. And the fact is that if conservatives did, they would have the support of the Republican Party in their, in their districts, because pretty much every county in West Virginia has gone Republican. On the federal level, I think my biggest concerns at the federal level is, look, the only power that we have, right, is through our representatives. And yet our representatives refuse to utilize the power of the purse to defund and defang some of these agencies. I don't know how we fix that other than, trying to get, new people in there. But what I discovered in my, I ran for Congress in this last primary, is that it's so influenced by money and so influenced by the establishment and the status quo and these, deep political ties and everything, that for an outsider, it's really hard to break through that. I mean, you got to have a lot of money, especially in a state like mine where it's very rural, and my district covers, I think it's 5.5 hours to the furthest distance. Most of the people here are rural, and so it's a lot of direct mailers and things like that in order to reach people. But the money in politics is quite sickening, and I think that's part of the problem, but I don't see a solution anytime soon. I hope that President Trump will make some good decisions as commander-in-chief to correct some of the problems that we have with abuses of power, like the surveillance state. I'm very concerned about that. And the main reason I'm concerned about it is that you've got essentially the FBI. They have like a liaison position sitting inside NSA. They have access to the system, and they can pull their own, information off of the tip system and all that. My concern is, how do we stop that? How do we bring that to light? I understand the importance of surveillance. I understand, like you were talking early in the show about, the CIA's mission and its importance. I do see that and understand that. I do see that the FBI does have an important mission, especially in regards to investigations. I don't think that they should be making any arrests. I think that should be happening by the local police or the people who have jurisdiction, and the FBI needs to go back to just an investigative role only in support of, the local law enforcement when things go outside the, across jurisdictions. But I think that we've got a real problem, because here's the thing. If we know, there's been several articles, one that came out, there were hundreds of thousands of illegal uses of Section 702 to spy on American citizens. This was a federal judge announced this. And then there was another recent one, and I don't remember the numbers on that, but we keep hearing about this, and yet we don't see anybody going to jail. We don't see any FBI, agents who abuse this power, being prosecuted for it, for deprivation of rights under color of law. And so my concern is that it's so pervasive and it's so widely used that they're using it to develop blackmail. It's basically like J. Edgar Hoover on steroids at the FBI, where they've got dirt on everybody, including members of Congress, including judges, and and corporate leaders. And so, they have control. They really can manipulate and get what they want, and nobody's going to hold them accountable for fear that they're going to expose the dirt that they have on them. What are your thoughts on that, and how do we fix that?
Well, one of the first big debates on 702 was in 2008, and I was part of the team at the White House who wrote essentially the advocacy position in favor of 702. At the time, it made sense. We have this growing, burgeoning capability. The basic thing is, in the old system, you had to petition the FISA court, say, this is why I want to do a wiretap or intercept, because of this specific reason. What happened was with the massive increase in capabilities, the inverse started happening. We're going to collect everything and then mask out what we're not supposed to be looking at, like an American citizen that we don't have an approved warrant
Right.
for wiretap, things like that. So the inverse started happening. We just, and the Republican House choked, and I don't mean to beat up on Speaker Johnson. I'm disappointed. This most recent renewal of 702,
Yeah.
my policy position was enough. We need to go back to the old system. We need to go back to the old doing it, where you have to have a very specific case that's being developed, and then you petition the FISA court. Not, we're going to collect everything and then back out
Right.
what we're not supposed to be seeing. Well, I mean, all kinds of tomfoolery can be had with it, and people going, I know I'm not supposed to be seeing this, and you're not supposed to be seeing this, but did you know who was talking to who and what they were saying? I'm just going to slide this over to you, and this never happened. I mean, no, this is crazy. It becomes a weaponization of government, and it's processes and procedures like that. We have to essentially nullify the 702, go back to the old system where they must justify case by case. Now they're time sensitive things. Terrorism is involved. People die.
They should have to go before a judge, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In reality, those cases, they do happen, but they're rare and infrequent in the sum total of all the traffic. So sorry, guys and girls, to go back to the old way of justifying every access you want to do. So we got to go back to that. Congress and the Republican Congress could have killed it, and they let it pass. So that's the weaponization of government, and it goes back to that marriage of big tech and federal law enforcement and intel, where the American public became the target. Now, one thing we haven't talked about at all, but I think was also a defining point, and at the time I was working on a parallel piece of legislation. At the time, but it was the 2012 Smith-Moon update, and that was the law that allowed federal information that was created to educate foreign publics to turn around. Well, hey, we're already spending public money to create this. We just share this with the American people. And at the time, I mean, that wasn't my piece of legislation, but I go, well, it kind of makes sense. We've already spent money on this. Why not share it with the American people? But the problem is that was a slippery slope that essentially became the cudgel that was used during COVID. Anybody who questioned government information was now an enemy of the state. That was the perversion of the Smith-Moon update. So got to undo the Smith-Moon update, because now it's not information that was created by the American government. It was created by the American government, and you better agree with it or else. Okay, that's wrong. That's not why we came out with the Smith-Moon update, but it's been perverted, and Republicans voted for that also, just like Democrats.
Well, another thing too that happened that I think has been instrumental in creating this problem is they decided, CISA in particular, that agency made this decision that they were going to treat disinformation and misinformation the same as cyber attacks or cyber warfare.
There's no legal basis for the term disinformation.
There's not. We have free speech in this country, and so they basically at first they tried to control it through the Department of Homeland Security and their whole disinformation czar that they were going to appoint. But then you had people that say, whoa, hold on a minute. At least Congress did step up and say, you can't do that. We have constitutional right to free speech, including spreading disinformation if we want to. But the problem became, and the real issue there is it's not like it's objective, right? It's very subjective. So what do you consider disinformation may be different than what I consider. What if it's about, Trump's a great guy, he's a great president, and you think that he's Satan? It's like there's this. it's a very subjective thing, and but only those in power are the ones that get to control speech at that point. What happened though was they moved it, they kind of offshored it from the government, and they started working through third parties, and and basically setting up these NGOs, to monitor speech and to influence things. And then they started connecting with Twitter and Facebook and all these other guys and doing all of the moderating for them and the fact checking for them, which, was completely biased. So that's a huge problem that I see. And I think that's something that absolutely, there was a court case with the Supreme Court recently, and I got to go back and look at it, but it was something that was really unfortunate, where they basically did not uphold that the federal government cannot influence, the big tech companies.
Well, yeah, you're talking about the Missouri, Louisiana case that went in front of the Supreme Court. It was not presented well. Just in all fullness, and some great people worked on it. Missouri, Louisiana did great, but when I listened to you get one morning to present it in front of the Supreme Court, and I'll be honest, we did not do the best job, just in full honesty, because the Supreme Court threw it out on standing. I don't totally understand that, but also they said, well, you haven't shown that anybody was actually harmed by this, which is a reasonable point. And I had been pointing, because the case, the case had already been kind of solidified by the time I was kind of got involved in this. But I said, you got to show damages, and we didn't show damages. Now, what the Supreme Court decided, they did not decide that the government could collude with big tech. They did not decide that. Now, that's some of the liberal press outlets. They said, hey, right, because of this case, now we can definitely target, silence, and censor. Hey, I'm on Matt Taibbi's Twitter dump list, and there's a lot more Twitter dumps that haven't been released yet. But I'm on that. I was thrown off of Twitter. I was number 862 of the top 10,000 for what? What was I doing? And so that was, but there's also Ken Paxton is advancing another case against, because DHS got schwacked big time, on this, Nina Jankowicz, the absolute psycho crazy woman who was the, self-appointed expert of disinformation. Again, there's no legal definition. U.S. government, you cannot do something unless there is a legal basis behind it. There is no such thing as disinformation in law. Sorry. And so that obliterated the HS effort. So it went over to State Department, and now Texas is after State Department, the Global Engagement Center. And one of my colleagues, Patricia Watts, is a named defendant in that. I used to work with Patricia. I thought she was on our side, and I'm going, holy smokes. She's over Global Engagement Center. They were using NGOs to, it's too dangerous for us to do this, so we're going to have nonprofits create these lists of names of Americans. Oh my, these people have lost their minds.
Well, we're almost out of time, and there's so much more that I want to cover. So I hope that you'll come back and we can get into some other topics as well. But I always like to give the last word, to our guest, and give you opportunity, to tell folks, number one, where can people find you? Do you have a presence on social media, and where can they follow you? And I know your books are on Amazon. And in fact, I ordered one of them today, so I'm going to be reading through it.
Well,
but what's the one key message that you hope that our audience takes away from this conversation? And please do tell us where people can find you.
One key message: fight. Just like President Donald J. Trump said, fight. We fight no matter what, no matter the odds, no matter how bleak it looks, no matter what. God forbid Kamala Harris becomes the president, but even if she did on some remote chance, we fight no matter what. And that doesn't mean taking up arms, doesn't mean surrendering arms either, but it doesn't mean but it means we fight with whatever means we have. But you got to get smarter. We got to get, the reason they're running circles around us is because we spent a lot of time bellowing, not enough time understanding the sausage making. Got to get involved in this stuff at the county level. So we fight. I'm Colonel Ret John, Colonel R.E.T. John, Substack, Getter, and Truth. Might get back on Twitter. We'll see. But Substack, Getter, and Truth. Substack's the best. I put out a daily blast on Substack. And then also the books are available on Amazon. And signed copy, go to Lindell My Store. But the unsigned copies, just go to Amazon.
Well, I definitely recommend that you get back on X. I will tell you that when I first came back on it, because I was booted off permanently, and when I came back on, it was like, at first there was still a lot of censoring going on, but I think they've worked a lot of that out, and I'm not seeing those types of things. In fact, most of our audience tonight is on X, and we've got 1,000 viewers live right now, over 1,000 watching, and at least I would say probably the most, actually over 1,000 of them are on X. So it's a great platform now, and there's something too on there called X Spaces, where you can get a lot of people that can talk and have communicate about different issues, and it's pretty fascinating. So I like what they're doing there. It certainly beats Facebook. So and I stream it on Facebook, but half the time they cancel my stream on there. So it is what it is. Well, look, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode, the Raising Cain Show. But we've uncovered critical insights about the deep state and the fight to save our republic with Colonel Mills. As we reflect on tonight's discussion, let's remember the importance of vigilance and action in preserving our freedoms. And it starts locally, folks. It starts locally. Get involved. Find out, about your local committees. Find out about your school board. Do the research. Do your homework. And tell your friends. The fact is, a lot of people will vote based on what people that they trust tell them. And so you do have a lot of influence locally. I always like to end my show in a moment of prayer. I believe that we can't do this. We can't win this fight without God's help. And so with that, Heavenly Father, we come before you with grateful hearts for the opportunity to gather and seek truth in a time of uncertainty. We thank you for the wisdom and insight shared by Colonel Mills, and we ask that you guide us in understanding the complexities that face our nation. Lord, we pray for our leaders and those in positions of power. Grant them the courage to uphold justice, the wisdom to seek truth, and the strength to protect our constitutional freedoms. Illuminate the hidden corridors of power so that transparency and integrity may prevail. Help us as citizens to be vigilant and proactive in preserving the liberties that our forefathers fought to secure. Give us the discernment to recognize the threats to our republic and the resolve to stand against them. May your peace and protection be upon our nation. Guide us in our endeavors to reclaim and uphold the values upon which our country was founded. Strengthen our resolve to combat justice and inspire us to act with righteousness and integrity in all we do. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nate.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, the time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.